you've been announced as the national IMMAF coach for the Team Australia. Obviously, that's been pretty quiet at the moment.
Yeah, been a quiet year. I mean, we announced an entire staff. So Ben Ewan, former UFC fighter, now fights for Ryzen, and a student that I scholarshiped out at Tiger Muay Thai is an assistant coach, and Renato Subotic, who came from Italy. He's over here training with some really high level people. He does a lot of open mat stuff at his gym, UFC Rockdale, and lets pros and amateurs kind of come in and mix it up and do a bit of like higher pace sessions. It's not like, hey, we're going to teach an armbar today, like straight into like, somewhat live drills, still drills, and then a bit of sparring to finish. And he gets a lot of good people around him, and he works with Martin Nguyen and a couple other high level guys and girls. So his knowledge of IMMAF and obviously of MMA kind of coalesced into offering him an assistant coaching spot, but we've been just dormant because we can't do anything. We were every step of the way like, if this happens, we're going to announce this. If this happens, we're going to announce this, and then nothing. Everything got shut down and went the opposite way. So it was like, well, we'll just wait till next year.
Let me ask you though. How does the IMMAF work? Is it open to anyone? Like, is it a case of that you hold specific tryouts and people come in and try out? Or is it more as a head coach that you talk to specific gyms and see who they've got in their gyms and kind of take it in that way? Like, is it more an invitational based thing, or is...
Well, it's gonna be a bit of both now. So I'll give you the history of it. So I first came across IMMAF through my UFC cornerman, Ed Bavlock, who's in Melbourne. And he took a team, and I'm not sure if it was just the power of the internet, basically, which is how I found all my fights back in the US. Like, I never fought at home when I lived in the US. I never had to like sell tickets. I was always the away guy. But also it was a time where MMA was a bit of a thing, so people would just show up just to watch fights. Where now the best guys in the world are on TV for free every other night, so people aren't walking down to the local to watch it. So the power of the internet somehow got Ed connected with IMMAF, and he brought a couple of his athletes and then coaches that he knew and liked. He kind of just said, hey, like, I've come across this thing. Would you guys want to go as well and do like a bit of a, like, represent Australia? So there were times at the IMMAF Worlds in the first, 6-7 years where Ed brought his athletes, where they'd get to the other country, but they'd never met the Australians that were also going. So it was kind of like awkward. Like, you sort of got to, introduce yourself and say, hey, we're all Team Australia. Whether or not the other team or the other people felt like that, it was like, well, we're just this gym from wherever, and we've just shown up to compete. But he did a really good job trying to make it like, hey, we're still Australian. We're here fighting against the world kind of thing. And over the years, it got a bit more like that, where it was a bit of a team, but it was still a very scattered effort. Because it was just a couple coaches that, again, had heard about it. So he was going to move to Ireland, but then COVID hit. So as part of his moving to Ireland, we did this big Oceania tournament where I was actually able to help put a couple guys on. So it was that invitational in a sense for the Oceania because I matchmake. So I have a pretty big list of coaches and athletes. And so he's one of the top amateurs. He's one of the top amateurs. He wants to compete, and he's pretty good. Like, let's get these guys a spot. And we had a really good showing in March, early March, before everything shut down. And we were excited for the year because we ran some tryouts for those. Again, mostly invitational, but we did put it out to the public. And we planned on doing the same thing, like inviting people in to do tryouts, have workouts together, try to see most people in the same room. But we've got to be able to trust people from like Perth to report back with an accurate level of someone's skill when we can't get a guy from Perth and Melbourne in the same room to assess them. So it's going to be...
Is there any point though?
How you going like
is
that
there any
for a
point
while.
though? Like, you've got the Australian team. Is there a point, like, say in March you've got a tournament coming up? Is there a point that you go, okay, a month out we are going to fly everyone in and kind of house them, or no? It's not at that.
Well, the hard part is who's flying them in, who's housing them. Like, we're not Russia or Bahrain where we have like a prince just funding it through the government. So
Yeah.
until we can get some sponsorship, and I know Richie Cranny's really working on that angle, um, to try to maybe even run some of the smaller events and get some sponsorship money and some maybe ticket money and revenue coming through the door to then spend it back on the best guys to go do the best thing, the worlds and the Oceanas and things like that. So at the amateur level in wrestling, I mean, we have to fly ourselves everywhere. If we're going to go do off-season wrestling and try to go like on the Olympic pathways and things like that, like it's hard unless Home Depot or someone's sponsoring you. It's a really difficult thing, and you only get anything from the American government, and this is like recent, like in the last 15 years. They've started putting out like a $10,000 bounty on a silver medal and 20 on a gold or something like that. So it's tough. So a lot of amateur athletes get it that you're putting your time in, and parents know. From the time you're a kid to the time you're wherever you go, they know it could be potentially expensive.
Well, yeah.
So
Over
there's
here as a
some
kid,
there's
we
some parents that are
over here as
good.
a kid we had I guess our version of the Girl Scouts cookies, but like it was just boxes of chocolate. I remember as a kid, you'd have a basketball tournament coming up,
All the time.
and I was like, "You want to buy chocolate? You want to buy chocolate?" And you literally go around just literally $2 at a time, $2-3 at a time,
Yep.
and that was kind of
We'd
how.
sell frozen steaks and frozen pizzas for wrestling. That was a fundraiser for about 10 years in a row, and if not, it was Snickers and peanut butter cups and, all that. Yeah, it gets an eyebrow raise out of everyone, those Reese's peanut butter cups. Um, but yeah, it was the same thing, selling magazines, just whatever you could, selling discount cards to like 10 local businesses that would give you 25-30% off on your order. So you could sell that card for like $20. And hopefully they'd get $20 in savings through using it for the year. Um, but there's parents that sort of look at sport and go, "Yep, I'm going to have my kid in sport. Da, 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 da. Ooh, this is getting expensive. I hope he doesn't get too good."
Well, it
There's
is,
other
it is,
parents that
and
are like, "Take
it's
this
a
as far as you
massive
can,"
commitment.
because
It's a massive commitment because
yeah, I
it's
mean,
like years. It just goes on and on, and not even just the tournaments. Like for I remember, as I say, I had a basketball background, and it was, even buying the shoes, right? And then as a kid,
yep,
right, you want the Jordans, and like they're not cheap,
no,
and because you're playing every day, like whether it be on the schoolyard, whether it be at practice, whether
you're beating those shoes
you're
up.
beating those shoes up real quick. So every like few months, it's like, and another pair of shoes, and it adds up. It really does. And then,
Yeah,
you had player registration, then you had court fees every week, and then you had this and that, and it just team uniforms. I mean, as I say, a lot of the times the teams would try to fundraise to some degree, but like there is a massive cost associated with it.
yeah. So it's with IMF. I mean, the athletes are gonna have to meet us halfway or better most of the time. Like we can organize the events, so we can get ourselves over to Worlds. My coach paid for his ticket to Worlds every year. His athletes paid their own way. There wasn't even like a big, I guess, organization. IMAF, it was just IMAF was a world organization, and these couple Aussie coaches went, "Yeah, we'll participate and be Australian and fly the flag," but there's no Aussie team. There's no office in Sydney CBD that's working on IMAF Australia every day. You know, and even now that we have a little bit of a team, it's still very much volunteer effort put in. Not much come out. No, we got to find ways to raise revenue. It's not There's nothing just there for us, to offer. So yeah, it's exciting to start something from the ground up, and I'm sure it's going to be frustrating at times, but in the end, like to run these Oceanas and stuff like that, if you can't fly in from Melbourne or Sydney or wherever to go to Queensland or wherever it's going to be, spend a couple $100 to fight like potentially 3 times in a weekend and experience like international competition, but you'll fly over there to like go to schoolies or something similar. You know what I mean? Like, come on. So hopefully the draw of that experience is enough, because in the end, like for us as coaches, that's what it's about too. Like I'm super excited to get to see 50, 60 national flags flying in an opening ceremony, and then watch athletes show up at breakfast on day 2 with black eyes and then know that they have a fight that night. and just watch them grind through and do their thing, and see some of the trials and tribulations, and even the controversy. Like, it sucks, especially when you're on the wrong side of a bad call. But like, it's all part of the experience. It's right in there with like the smells and the sounds, and oh, there's that drama of the Russian versus the guy from France, and the guy didn't tap, but the ref, and the so yeah, it's an interesting thing, and some of the stories I hear are just the most random things that stick out in people's brains, and I think that's the beauty of it too. Like, we're all there experiencing the same thing, but we all have different memories because we paid attention to different parts.